To another episode of Equestrian's Library. We're going to be looking at another chapter from the culture of the horse, status, discipline, and identity in the early modern world. Look at Chapter 5, just a bit of control, the historical significance of the 16th and 17th century German bit books by Pia Cuneo. She discovered this niche of books while visiting a library in Wolfenbüttel, Germany, and what she discovered is that they came to a rise around the mid-1500s and then began to change, and especially changed by the mid-1600s. So for about 100 years, these books came and became masterworks of art and explanation on how to control a horse using specific bit designs, to transforming into how to train your horse and the emphasis moving away from control through a specific bit design. They ranged from everything from a little pamphlet with woodcut illustrations made from wood blocks, and they usually didn't have an author mentioned and were probably passed around locally. But you also had these other books that she describes as being very large with these full like illustrations and prints, and I'm going to have a picture to the side, either here or here, showing you guys one of the illustrations up close. And the idea was that these books were designed by spur makers, spur designers, who also were giving people at the time, like the Archduke Maximilian II, who would later become emperor, as well as Friedrich Ulrich and the Bavarian Duke, Albrecht, etc. So you have all these German dukes and princes that are having these books made for them to see. And what she discovers is not only are they designed to cure specific behavioral problems with horses, they were also meant to take to your blacksmith and have this particular bit made for your horse, or and for the riders. And they're very fancy bits with long shanks and all kinds of stuff happening on the mouthpiece part. And they're rather, she makes the point that around the Renaissance you have this rise in technology and science, and people trying to use technology to control nature, and this rather harsh trying to control way of controlling horses. And we see that soften, as she points out, the later bit books from the early 1600s move away from this is the bit you need to make to control this bad problem, or a horse that does this, to, oh, this is how the horse's head is designed, and the language starts shifting, and you start getting more text and words explaining how to train a horse and rider, instead of pictures of bits for the blacksmith to make to solve all of your problems. So there's a real shift in how training is viewed. She also makes the argument that there was a big economic shift at the time as well, because Europe also went through a large war, which made the Saxony region of Germany, it hit them hard economically, and so maybe the dukes and princes and so forth weren't able to lavish as many resources, both money and metal, towards these lavish bits and so forth. And there's also, lots of evidence to show that around that time period, many of the people in the upper echelons of European society were starting to look at horse training as something that could be milder and not fixed completely by making a bit to solve all of your problems. And then maybe working with the horse would be better. And so you start to see a shift back towards what we hear from Xenophon, way back in ancient Greece. and you continue to see it with the Duke of Newcastle and other authors that come along and train and write about horsemanship in the 1700s. And so, but for a minute, writing was a little harsh. They were trying to do what they could with this newfound technology and newfound ways of disseminating this information with printing and with copper plates and so forth. So anyway, that was a fun little trip through history and a nice mix of historical record with the bit books themselves, and then looking also at some of the material culture with how the books were made, what they were made of for the different statuses, and how they were illustrated and so forth. And then, you know, how we can see in art the results of these, because it was permeating. She does point out that these harsh bits do show up in the artwork at the time, not just in the bit books, but also in the famous woodcuts and so forth of Albrecht Dürer, the very famous block printer from the 1500s. And she concludes, as historical documents, 16th and 17th century German bit books can be surprisingly rich. They provide information about an unusual form of book production that combines the professional forces of printers, artists, and horsemen/spur makers. They indicate techniques and assumptions that play key roles in the history of writing. They reveal the uses of and attitudes toward early technology. They constitute an important context for the iconography of bits and bridles in works of art, and they can offer a way of thinking critically about historical periods defined according to changes in attitudes about mechanisms of control. Regarded in combination with other historical and cultural evidence, 16th and 17th century German bit books can speak to a variety of significant historical issues and conditions. In so doing, they provide the historian with a unique kind of information, as it were, straight from the horse's mouth. And we'll end with that today. I will see you again soon, and we'll cover yet another chapter. We're almost done here, but this is quite an interesting read and uncovers some ways of learning about horsemanship through Western Europe from perspectives that you might not have known existed. It's been pretty fun. Anyway, let me know what you think, leave a comment, and please subscribe if you want to see more. Cheers!